Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Yashodanandana Brajaganandana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Madhava Kunda Bihari Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe. Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Gaura Kimanandi Jayam Shupad Paramahamsa Pri Vraj Kasaj Stotra Satta Sri Simad His Divine Grace Hirabai Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON DBT Founder Charya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Samavata Bhakta Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jainita Gaura Pimanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Tadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitam Sya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Saptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusuti Devi Pranamame Hare Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Vipasindubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Narayanam Namaskritya Ram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatutamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who who is praised with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttamasloka Charitam Sakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Ramyam Swasthaya Nama. Is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Om Sarabhyaya Namaha. Mukham karoti vachalam pangom langayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We continue from the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3, entitled Pure Devotional Service, and today we are doing text number 20. Vile Bhatorukrama Vikramam Ye Na Srinvataha Karna Pute Narasya Jivasati Dardurik Daduruk Dardurikeva Dardurikeva Suta Na Topagayati Urugaya Gataha Dile Bato Rukrama Vikramanye Dile Bato Rukrama Vikramanye Nasrin Bata Nasrin Bata Karna Pute Narasya Nasrin Bata Karna Pute Narasya Jivasati Dar Durikena Sutta Jivasati Dar Durike Basuta Nacho Pagayatyurugaya Gattaha Nacho pagayatyurugaya gataha Bile batorukrama vikramanye Nasrin vata karnapute narasya Jivasvati daduri kevasuta Nacho pagayatyurugaya gataha Vile batorukrama vikramanye Nasrin vatakarnapute narasya Divasate darduri kevasuta Nacho pagayatyurugaya gattaha Vile batorukrama vikramanye Nasrin vatakarnapute narasya Divasate darduri kevasuta Nacho pagayatyurugaya gattaha Vile snake holes, but like Urukrama, the Lord, who acts marvelously, Vikraman, prowess, yea, all these, na, never, Srinvataha, heard, Karnapute, the ear holes, Narasya, of the man, Jiva, tongue, Asati, useless, Dardurika, of the frogs, Iva, exactly like that, Sutta. O Sutta Goswami, na, never, cha, also, upagayati, chants loudly, urugaya, worth singing, gataha, songs. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of a snake, like the holes of snakes, and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Kindly repeat after me. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Purport. Devotional service to the Lord is rendered by all limbs or parts of the body. It is the transcendental dynamic force of the spirit soul. Therefore, A devotee is engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. One can engage in devotional service when the senses of the body are purified in relation with the Lord, and one can render service to the Lord with the help of all the senses. As such, the senses and the action of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. The purified senses are engaged not in sense gratification, but in the service of the Lord in toto. In toto means, what does in toto mean? Fully, completely. Yeah. The word total is derived from in toto. The Lord is the supreme with all senses, and the servitor who is part and parcel of the Lord also has the same senses. Service to the Lord is the completely purified use of the senses as described in the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses. And thus there was a perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. The spiritual understanding is nothing like an electrical charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. Srila Prabhupada was giving the example of one well-known, famous spiritual person from Bengal who had touched his disciple, who upon being touched by the Guru had become unconscious. And the Guru was then crying because he had lost all of his Shakti. We won't mention names, but Prabhupada is making the point that this is not how one receives transcendental knowledge through some kind of electronic or energy exchange in that way. So Prabhupada will give further explanation here. Everything is full of sense and logic, and the exchange of views between the master and disciple is possible only when the reception is submissive and real. When the reception is submissive and real. And of course, this is directly connected with the instruction that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, how one is meant to, what are the qualifications? 3 basic qualifications for someone to receive transcendental knowledge. For one to receive or to understand or realize what is called tattva, knowledge of the absolute truth, that very well known verse, tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. This is the actual way to become qualified to experience what is called tattva darshan. one who actually receives or becomes qualified for Tattva Darshan becomes a Tattva Darshi. And the first of the three qualifications are mentioned in this verse. Pranipat. Pranipat means to develop a submissive mentality. Means to be humble, actually. Means to recognize that I actually, as we chant also every day, Om Agyana Timirandasya, our position is that of Agyan. There is Gyan means knowledge, Agyan means no knowledge. So one has to recognize, one has to understand that I am missing in knowledge, I am missing in understanding. Therefore, I have to approach someone who has knowledge. Same thing in regards to disease. Unless one somehow understands that he has some particular malfunctioning in the body or in the mind, he has no reason to approach a physician. We only go and see the doctor when we have, or the dentist if we have a toothache, or a doctor if we have some pain in the stomach, whatever ill that we have. So this is like the preliminary qualification. One must understand that something is not right, something is missing, something is missing. So this point is being made here. The importance, only when the reception is submissive and real. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one should receive the teachings of Lord Chaitanya with intellect and full senses, so that one can logically understand the great mission. That's, of course, the other qualification which is mentioned in the same verse that we quoted a few minutes ago from the Bhagavad Gita. Pranipat, submissiveness, and then prashna. One should be inquisitive. Means one intelligence is there to actually inquire about this most important subject matter of the absolute truth. So Prabhupada is referring here to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is actually giving us the topmost level of transcendental realization. Bhagavad Gita is introducing us to the basic concepts of the absolute truth, and those are further elaborated and explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the full culmination. This is the special gift of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. We are all belonging to the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, and the culmination of transcendental knowledge is actually delineated and very nicely presented by the author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and has been, of course, elaborated before him, before Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, by the very close associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So therefore, the contribution of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his teachings given to us through his most confidential and intimate associates, beginning with Swarup Damodar, who was his personal assistant, personal assistant of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was residing in Jagannath Puri, especially during the last 18 years of his manifest pastimes, were actually recorded. Swarup Damodar was maintaining a diary that diary was brought to Vrindavan by Raghunath Das Goswami, because when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disappeared, soon after his disappearance, Sarup Damodar, who was so close to him, also within a very short time, also left this material world, could not bear the separation of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Raghunath Das, who was also in Vrindavan, was feeling immense separation as well, and wanted to actually leave the world. So he decided, let me go to Vrindavan and I'll jump off Govardhan Hill. That was his plan. So, and he carried with him the diary of Sarup Damodar, and it is from this diary that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur compiled the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's why so much information about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and so much information about the Tattva was revealed, of course, by Sarup Damodar Goswami, and of course by the intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, who also had personal association and personal instructions. They received personal instructions from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And before I forget it, of course, since we're talking about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is being referred to here in the purport. Today is the disappearance of Srila Ishvarapuri, as we read a little earlier in the Vaishnava calendar. So these are all, of course, interconnected subject matters. This particular point of submissiveness, which is mentioned here by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, is of paramount importance, of course, and especially underlined and emphasized by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who gave us, as we recite every day, the Shikshastaka prayers, where this mood or mentality of submissiveness, which means humility, is of paramount importance. Unless one is submissive, unless one is humble, developing this mood and mentality of great humility, then Lord Chaitanya had very exalted personalities, because they especially personified this mood and mentality of humility. So just to continue here, one more paragraph to the purport. In the impure state of a living being, the various senses are fully engaged in mundane affairs. If the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about him from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish known as Gramya Kotha. Gramya Kotha. Gramya Kotha, Gram means village, village talk, means ordinary talk. I guess we also need to understand Gramya Kotha as what is village means gram and city means kota. What is it? What's in Bengali? Huh? Tahor. How do you spell that? S-H-A. Okay. Anyways, there is the Shastra is especially Nagar. Okay. Oh, Nagar. Gram, so Gram is village and Nagar is more or less town. Town, okay. So we say Gramya Katha and Nagara Katha. Because nowadays more and more people uh, live in towns and cities, isn't it? The trend for so many decades has been to live. So, so both, yeah, Gramya Katha, this point is being made here. If we are not engaged uh, in hearing about Krishna Katha, then we will naturally, because we have to hear. By nature, we have the ability and the tendency as well to hear. If we don't hear about Krishna, we will be hearing about Maya, about Maya. Yeah. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly. That is a duty of a pure devotee who has actually heard about them from the perfect sources. Many want to speak something to others, but because they are not trained to speak on the subject matter of Vedic wisdom, they are all speaking nonsense. And people are receiving them with no sense. Yes. So this is misusing our God-given senses, misusing our God-given intelligence, misusing our God-given mind. There are hundreds and thousands of sources for distributing mundane news of the world, and people of the world are also receiving it. Similarly, the people of the world should be taught to hear the transcendental topics of the Lord, and the devotee of the Lord must speak loudly so that they can hear. So what does it mean to speak loudly? Of course, especially it means to very widely make this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam available. We are utilizing technology to get out this message, isn't it? To counter the negative materialistic sound vibration of mundane subject matters, which is simply polluting the atmosphere and polluting the minds of people. Therefore, the importance of widely, this is the point Prabhupada is making here. So we do that as devotees also by utilizing modern day technology. So many, every day, I don't know if anyone has made any survey, uh, what, how many classes every day are being uh, heard, are available, for example, on the internet, isn't it? So, of course, huh? It has increased. Yes, it has increased, especially during the pandemic, and that's one good side effect. There are a few good side effects actually of this pandemic. It has forced the vast majority of people, including our own devotees, to become localized. Because to be localized is one of the important aspects of the Vedic culture. Vedic culture is promoting localized living. Um, and in the Vedic culture, as we know, something that was very helpful for people to become localized. Two things actually that are totally intimately connected. What in the Vedic culture helps one to become localized? Two things. One is that people have land. If you have land, you have to look after your land. And also, as important, if not more important, you have cows. When you have cows, you can't just run all over the place. You have to be home. You have to stay home because every day the cow needs care and attention. And every day, if you have land, if you know, if you want to properly utilize that land, as Vedic culture advocates that we should do, then one has to be localized. So in other places in the Bhagavatam, this is nicely explained that one, the vast majority of people were connected with some land, were living in villages. That's why village life is very much promoted as being the ideal arrangement for people, the vast majority of people, to live. And cities, of course, were there in the Vedic times as well, mainly and primarily for the purpose of administration. Kings would stay in, they would have their palace, isn't it? And they would administer the affairs of the country. Actually, when I went to Cambodia quite some years back, maybe 15 years back, at that time, and even probably to a large extent now, one could see this aspect of the Vedic culture very nicely, very clearly, because practically there are only a few main cities, the capital of Phnom Penh, and then a few others, smaller. And if one travels around the country of Cambodia, known as the Kingdom of Cambodia, it's one of the few kingdoms that are there. All one sees practically is are villages, and there are many cows as well. Because village life means having cows, and that was the living arrangement for the vast majority of people in Cambodia, which was the situation here in India as well. For that matter, before we were mentioning yesterday about industrialization, before the era of industrialization, vast majority of people were living in villages. So therefore, Prabhupada, in one conversation with one devotee, the devotee was making a remark that, the whole situation has been the disruption or corruption has been there for many centuries. Prabhupada was corrected him and told him, no, it's been especially since only the last 200 or 300 years that this type of deviation, major deviation, modern way of living, modernization, which is based on industrialization, has been existing and become more and more rampant only in the last 200 or so years, because it's connected with mechanization, industrialization, which is taking us away actually from our more natural way of living. So this is connected here with what is being explained by Srila Prabhupada. So just to come to a close here, the rest of the purport. The frogs loudly croak, with the result that they invite the snakes to eat them. So, yeah, that is a result of their loud sound vibration. The human tongue is especially given for chanting the Vedic hymns and not for croaking like frogs. So this is a nice example that frogs, they also make noise. They also during the rainy season especially, we hear the croaking of frogs, but that sound of the frogs is simply inviting death. So that comparison is there. When similarly, in the human form of life, we misuse our tongue for mundane subject matters, we're simply inviting death, in that we will, by that process of misusing this God-given gift of the tongue, which is meant, as Prabhupada points out here, especially has been given for chanting Vedic hymns so that we can remember uh, who we are and the purpose of life. So the word asati used in this verse is also significant. Asati means a woman who has become a prostitute. A prostitute has no reputation for good womanly qualities. Similarly, the tongue, which is given to the human being for chanting the Vedic hymns, will be considered a prostitute when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. Very nice comparison and very important point as well. The tongue becomes a prostitute, like a prostitute, uh, when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. We'll just read the verse again here, and if there's any comment or question, we'll take a few minutes for that. Translation again: one who has listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly. One who has not listened to the messages of the Lord and who has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of a snake and the tongue like the tongue of a frog. So that is the importance of the ears, and that is the importance of the tongue. The ears are meant for Shravanam. Shravanam, of course, means hearing about transcendental subject matters, and the tongue is meant for Kirtanam. Shravanam, Shravanam, Kirtanam. Shravanam, Kirtanam, then Vishnu Smaranam. Yes, then one will be able to remember. And remembrance is activity of the mind. So this is the message we are receiving this morning from Bhagavatam. The three activities of the mind are thinking, feeling, thinking, feeling, and willing. Willing means desire. Thinking, feeling, and willing. If we are not hearing about transcendental subject matters, our mind will be engaged in thinking, feeling, and willing in relation to mundane material subject matters, which will be our downfall. Yeah. So any comments or questions on any of this? Karta. Whether it's available. Actually, I was recently looking at a video. I think it was Indradumna Maharaj, when visiting recently, when staying in Vrindavan. I forget I think it was in relation to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. They were visiting that particular place where Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami had written the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And one of the places that the devotees were having darshan, the local Brahmana devotee serving there was showing them. It was covered with glass, and it was having the original manuscript, one portion, one maybe chapter or something of that original text. Whether the original diary of Sarup Damodar is available or not, I don't know. But it's possible because what they were shown was what was written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami 500 years ago on these palm leaves, right? So diary, of course, means they were kept on palm leaves. And there are many uh, libraries in India, especially some of the older libraries, where even here in Calcutta, for example, where we have our Bhaktivedanta, what is it? Bhaktivedanta Center, where they are maintaining ancient, yes, manuscripts. So I visited there a few years back actually, and they have some of these old, yeah, manuscripts written on palm leaf in Orissa as well. I believe in both in Bhubaneswar and Jagannath Puri, where they have Vrindavan. Yes, in many places actually. I'm sure in Benares as well. In different places. Most universities they will have, and many of these have yet to be actually translated. Because there are a lot of the ancient literatures, of course, was written in Sanskrit, or in just like a few years back, one of our devotees, Bharat Chandra Prabhu, had discovered a very important writing that is authored. It is said to be authored by the original Sahadev, the Pandava Sahadev. That's a whole interesting subject matter. But on protection of cows, there is one manuscript which was found actually in Jagannath Puri, one of the old libraries there. But it is written in very old Oriya language. We tried to. So far, we've not been able to get this translated. I gave it to one of our devotees, and I hope he's continuing to follow up on this, even though because it's so old, sometimes they get damaged. And so, but even whatever may be possible to extract from there, because as we know, during their last year in exile, during their year in incognito, the Pandavas had taken shelter of King Virata and his kingdom. And I came to know some years back that this kingdom of Virata was was touching what we know today as the border of Bengal and Orissa. And which district? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. One would have to do a bit of research, but the main point being that there's a lot of such literature which was written by such great personalities. Your question, of course, was in regard to Sarup Damodar. I don't know. I've not heard whether his manuscripts, his diary in particular, but it was in Vrindavan, and it was used by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Whether it's still available or not, I don't know actually. Yes. Yes. Cows. Yes. 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 Their head. Yeah, yes. Like bathing. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. This what you're mentioning is a further indication and proof, as Prabhupada mentioned also, that Vedic culture many centuries ago was all over the world. So there are remnants, just like you're mentioning that in Africa in some places. I read that also quite some years back. Uh, people uh, care for cows and they understand the importance of cow urine, for example. And yes, as a matter of fact, one thing I had read in regards to Africa is that when they were arranging marriages, similar to the situation here in India, the question was being asked, or the marriage was arranged based on how many cows you have. The Prabhupada makes that reference also in the context of Vedic culture, that because the system that is followed, that was followed nowadays much less, but still, is that what we call arranged marriage. The parents of the boy and the parents of the girl, uh, they when the time is mature, when the time comes, they start looking for who can be the boy or the girl to marry their son or daughter. And and one of the important considerations at that time was how much land do you have and how many cows do you have. Nowadays is like how much money you have in your bank account, you know, which is a different way of looking at things and much less of value, of course. Yeah. I think we have to close here. Maybe after the class, if there's any other question, we can. Yeah. Well, after, yeah, we're having the, okay, no problem. Yeah. So we will close now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Jai Sri Prabhupada Ki. Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna.